All right, let's jump right in. In the world of gaming, there's this massive tug of war going on. On one side, you've got these absolutely stunning, mind-blowing graphics. And on the other, well, you've got the simple need to actually see what you're doing. This is all about why clear, easy-to-read gameplay is, more often than not, the real winner over just a pretty picture.
You've totally seen this before, right? You see a trailer, a screenshot, and it looks like a masterpiece, a genuine work of art. But as we're going to see, the promise you get from a gorgeous static image is a whole different story from the reality of playing a game where you have to react in, a split second.
And this is really where we hit that great disconnect. This constant push for better and better graphics. We're talking ray tracing, super high-res textures, the whole shebang. It's giving us games that are incredible to look at. But sometimes they kind of forget about the most important person in the equation, you, the player.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say, yes, you absolutely have. We've all had that moment where you can't tell an enemy from a bush, or you completely lose track of your own character in a storm of particle effects. It's such a common frustration, and it's the exact problem we're going to unpack right now.
So what's the answer? What's the fix? Well, it really all boils down to one super important concept, visual clarity. It's about designing a game's look and feel to actually help the player, not just to show off. It's about cutting through all that visual noise to find the signal, the information that actually matters.
Okay, so what does that really mean in plain English? Visual clarity is all about how fast your brain can look at a screen, figure out that's a threat, that's my goal, and that's just background junk, and then, do something about it. It is the absolute foundation of gameplay that just feels good.
And look, clarity isn't just some vague idea, right? It breaks down into some really specific, tangible things. It's about immediately knowing what you're supposed to shoot at. It's about having low visual noise so you're not getting blinded by lens flares. It means the background actually stays in the background and the characters have shapes you can recognize instantly. The game is basically telling you visually what's most important, moment to moment.
So we know what it is, but what does that actually feel like when you're playing? How does this stuff translate to the experience when you've got the controller in your hands?
Think about any game where speed is everything. I mean, from racing games to competitive shooters. Your reaction time is king. Every single millisecond you waste trying to figure out what's on screen, that's a millisecond you're losing.
Okay, perfect example. A racing game like Motorsports Grand Prix Race. When you're blasting down a track at 200 miles an hour, you couldn't care less about how realistic the grass looks. You need to see the corner, the brake marker, the other car. Art that's too busy actually works against you, but clean, clear visuals, they lower that mental strain, and that is what lets you get into that amazing flow state where it feels like it's just you and the game.
But hey, it's not just about speed. What about a different kind of chaos? Let's talk combat. In a huge fight, the single most important piece of information is always, where am I? If you can't answer that question instantly, well, you're probably toast.
Right, so in an action game like Cat Robot Transform Hero, the screen can just be an insane explosion of effects. If the developers go overboard with fancy lighting and bloom, your character can literally just disappear in all that visual junk. But the solution is often pretty simple. High contrast colors, a really unique silhouette, things that make sure you are always the center of attention. It's the difference between skillfully dodging an attack and dying because you thought a laser beam was just a pretty lighting effect.
And this all brings up a really interesting point about immersion. We tend to think that for a game to feel immersive, it has to look super realistic. But here's the thing. True immersion isn't about photorealism. It's about a lack of friction. It's when the game just gets out of your way and lets you play.
A game like Shark Life Simulator is a perfect way to think about this. The feeling of being a shark, that comes from gliding through the water so smoothly. But if those water effects are too realistic, too murky, too much stuff floating around, and you can't even find your next meal, the whole illusion is shattered. Suddenly, you're not a shark anymore, you're just a frustrated person fighting with the game's visuals. Clear signposting is what keeps you in that fantasy.
So clarity is obviously key for good gameplay, but the benefits, they don't stop there. Deciding to go with a clear art style has some huge long-term advantages for performance and for a game's legacy. Hardware experts are already pointing this out. We're kind of heading for a performance wall. The constant push for fancier graphics is running up against the limits of the hardware people actually own. And we're not talking about some distant future. This is right around the corner.
Let's just break this down. The difference is pretty stark. Your fancy art game just devours video memory. It struggles to even hold a stable 30 frames per second, and it's often way less accessible. Now compare that to a clear art game. It's optimized so it runs at a buttery smooth 60 FPS, more people can play it, and, this is a big one, its style is timeless. It doesn't depend on tech that's going to look ancient next year.
So the long-term wins here are just massive. You get a game that runs well for way more people on way more computers. You get a game that's more accessible, which is awesome. And you get an art style that's not going to look dated in 5 years because it was built on solid design, not just the latest graphical trend.
And all of this, it brings us to the core idea, the golden rule that really ties this all together. And it's simple. Art in a game, in an interactive experience, has one primary job, and that is to serve the player.
I absolutely love this quote. It just perfectly nails the entire point we're talking about. A single gorgeous frame, that's a painting. But a game is about motion, it's about reaction, it's the sequence of frames that matters, and that sequence has to be easy to read. So at the end of the day, here's the ultimate takeaway. It really is this simple. You can have the most beautiful, breathtaking art direction in the entire world, but if it's getting in the way of the player actually playing the game, then it has failed. Period.
So, I'll leave you with a question to chew on. What's that one game for you? The one where the visuals are just so clean, so readable, that it just feels amazing to play. Think about it. That is the power of clarity.